All right.
Snap to it.
Well, Father, we give this time to you, Lord. Holy Spirit, use this material that we're about to go through. I pray that we will find things that are valuable to equip us for the ministry of teaching. But we do want to test these things and trust you to be our teacher once again, Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So again, the first part is kind of some commentary, just discussing, methods, what methods should be used when teaching. How do we determine methods to use? And then a list of just kind of ideas. Again, they're more geared towards youth, but I think many of them could be used in adult situations. But the idea is to get creative. The idea is to make the teaching process as creative, hands-on, interactive, kind of all those things that we've been talking about. So just some ideas that we won't read through that whole list. We'll just have that for you guys to check out and use at your discretion. But I thought we could read through the commentary of the first few pages first. So I'll go ahead and start us off. So this is from Teaching That Makes a Difference. Subtitle, How to Teach for Holistic Impact. What methods should you use to teach is chapter 7. And it claims to be the world's most comprehensive list of teaching strategies.
Okay.
So maybe so.
My goodness.
The teacher who, I mean, it is pretty long. The teacher who wishes to be really effective will be sure that his teaching is characterized by variety.
I really like that, you know why?
Why?
Because that just lends itself to the fact that when you go into a teaching atmosphere, when, there are different kinds of people, the old phrase is read the room. But there are different people with different reading levels, different levels of understanding and stuff like that, and it is incumbent upon that teacher, for all practical purposes, he wants effective to be, his teaching to be effective. He's got to know where his corporate body of students are at overall, a picture, and then if he feels led to do those things individual, that'll certainly be easier to detect.
Sure.
Writing, wide scope, then that's wide.
Yeah. Yeah, so variety could maybe reach multiple different people. I would also say that variety could have a benefit even if it's just one person. I think the variety, it's kind of like, the saying variety is the spice of life. What you want your teaching experiences to be is, memorable encounters, memorable experiences, not just, in terms of remembering all the information, but to make each experience stick out. I mean, think about it. We've been doing this for about 2.5 years. If, psychologically speaking, probably the first few weeks, even though they were longer ago, probably could potentially stick out a little bit more than, the weeks in between. Maybe there were certain times or certain classes that we were more, engaged in, but regardless, there's no way we're going to remember every single day, individual, class period that we spent together, right? But, what would make individual days stick out? Well, it would be the variety of those experiences. And I'll admit we haven't used a whole lot of variety in terms of methods like we're going to talk about. There's definitely been a variety of material, which is good too. Obviously, we don't want to be just doing the same thing every day. But I think this is an area for me, that I want to grow in, just as the spirit leads, but you know, to have more variety of experiences involved, in the classroom. And I think, yeah, that's kind of the way I take that. Well, I can keep rambling, but okay, go ahead.
Jared,
Uh-huh.
just like the Holy Spirit will turn Rolodex every once in a while. We use that variety of experiences. Would you please take under advisement? Not necessarily road trips, but, out of the classroom experiences where we put that practical stuff to the test.
Sure.
Yeah, as a whole group, you know, and particularly if we are blessed enough to have an occasion where all five of us are in the room at the same time, like on a Tuesday. I just get this vision that, you know, yeah, variety definitely would be the spice of life.
When you were talking there, it reminded me of when I was in school, I was second or third grade. I was taught mathematics. I could see on a book, I could say, I had someone to say 2 and 2 is 4, but when I saw it, I understood 2 and 2 is 4, but when I saw it, the verbal instruction along with the visual instruction, it came together.
Sure, sure.
And I'm not so surprised, that you appreciate it that way, because, you know, it's well known, most general psychologists are gonna tell you, guys are visually oriented. I'm a visual
Me
learner,
for sure.
yeah, visual learner, well,
Um,
and a visual appreciator too.
Well, I'm more auditory. I do a far much better job of learning if I have dialogue with multiple people. But if I had to just learn by what I read, hang it up. But if we read and then I have this, multiple sources, and I'm able to see something, well, that's when it connects with me.
Well, you know, this illustration comes to mind because I think those two things are good, but I think there's another level, you know, kind of going along with the classroom, or field trip kind of an idea. So let's say, and some of you guys might already know this, but pretend you're learning for the first time how to change out a light switch. And let's say to teach you, I explained it to you. Right? I just went step by step, very methodically, and I explained that to you, right? So that's one form of getting that information. Or I could do it in front of you. I could show you guys, you know, I could take apart that light switch and put a new one in, and you could watch the whole process.
This very thing happened to me recently.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Or I could hand you the light switch and the tools, and you could do it yourself, right? Now, which one of those methods is going to be most impactful?
I don't know about impactful, but when you're talking about a light switch, I would really prefer that somebody that knew their handy to teach me how to do it step by step, because if they just handed me the tools and said, figure it out, guess what's gonna happen?
And
I'll set this place on fire.
and yet,
We will be able to start a new building project immediately.
is there anything more valuable than hands-on experience?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point.
Exactly.
I think
I would
probably
say all three.
you need all three. I mean, I could show you, and that would definitely be in some ways better than just trying to explain it. If I just tried to explain it, you know, that's that doesn't sound like very much fun, but
What
Yeah.
was it?
But, you know, just showing you, you don't necessarily understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. If I just showed you, there would be something lacking to that, you know? There's something that an explanation has that just showing you, you know, doesn't have. And I would say ideally, if you wanted to fully learn, you would need to actually do it. But, you know, to James' point, you know, if we started that or if that was the only, you know, thing that we did, that could also be a problem, and probably wouldn't burn the building down, but you might light your fingers up a little bit. You might scorch your tools some, which I've done a few times, but anyways, that's just kind of the example that comes to mind. Variety, right? You could say, oh, this is the way I learn. But I would argue that we actually all need to learn from variety of experiences, as opposed to this person learns this way and that person learns that way. You know, I could say I learn best with auditory, and yet if I just explained it to that auditory learner, they wouldn't learn as well as the person who got all three experiences, you know, and you could say the same for anyone. I'm a hands-on learner, I'm a visual learner. Well, you know, I guarantee you, no matter, you know, if we found that person's sweet spot, they would still not learn as well as the person who got all three experiences. So anyways,
I decided to grow in all three. No doubt. I think on Eagle's point, and I'm counting on myself, is probably the auditory learner. But I had an experience recently, it was like, late June, they sent me the new lawnmower for Clausen. And the instruction manual on how to assemble this thing together had the print that's so small. You would have had it in Eagle.
Wait. do eagles know how to read?
Yeah, I would read, but the sharp eyes. But I said, Matt, I know you're busy, could you or Tim come over and show me? And Tim came over, he was really gracious. He showed me how to do it. He says, yes, James, I agree that the print is way too small, but he showed me how to do it. He took the time to do it slowly and explain why. And in that moment, I said, well, dang, I can do this. So I poured it down and put it, yeah, and put it back together. And when an issue with regard to the maintenance came up, I called Tim. I said, Tim, can you with this again? He said, yes, Jim, so I'll come over and explain that. And he said, yeah, I can do that. So
There you go.
I had never bothered with them one time. I've been able to do that without any trouble, both clean and used thing. But like I said, I agree with you, the all three, it's all three renters.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, well,
I had a story from the locals, we'll let it go.
Yeah.
well, we can tell a story. Pray about it.
Completely applicable here with me.
Okay, go ahead.
1979, I'm breaking into oil fields. They want to make me a pumper, but I don't have what it takes. You gotta learn how to maintain the production on those wells. And I was shown and I was instructed, but until he showed me, okay, let's go do this. But until I actually went and did it one time by myself, grabbing it, you know, your sack, you know, let's do this, because I've 3,000 pounds of pressure, I could have blown up that quadrant. A big area, lots of pressure, so it,
Be like a.
but that one time that I did it, from then on, I went to my foreman in 2 days. Hey, I got this. I'll be your pumper now.
Cool.
That's awesome. He showed me. I didn't have the confidence, but then wait a minute. Okay, do this. I'll put it together.
Nice. Yeah.
All three.
Yeah.
All three.
All three, yeah.
Well, so we got all that just out of the title and the introductory quote.
True.
It goes on.
Get mileage out.
He says, are you feeling challenged yet? Maybe even a bit overwhelmed? That's understandable. Teaching adolescents, so like I said, this book is for specifically related to teaching teenagers. Teaching adolescents is an incredibly important and complex task. But I hope you're also feeling encouraged, because it is possible to learn to teach well. It takes time and effort. There is a lot to know and understand, but it's well worth it. Here's a brief review of what has been covered so far. What is teaching and why does it matter? So this isn't obviously what we've talked about, but we'll see what this book has gone over so far. To create a framework for understanding why teaching well matters. Who are adolescents, to better understand what is happening in and to the adolescents you teach. That's something we'll talk about too, is the role that the individual needs of your audience, of your students, and how to take that into account. Who are your adolescents to give you a way to learn more about the unique teens God has given you? How do kids learn? To explore various learning theories so you can know that not all kids learn the same way. Although, as I just argued, they all need lots of ways to learn. What should you use to teach to help you think more intentionally about the curriculum you use? How can you prepare to teach to help you put together the nuts and bolts of a lesson? That leads us to this chapter, which will help you think about the specific methods, strategies, activities, and ideas to employ as you teach. A quick note, this chapter is chock full of lists and ideas. It's really more of a reference tool than fun fireside reading. You should approach it knowing it is not written like the other chapters. Coming up are chapters that will help you evaluate your teaching and better understand how Jesus taught, as well as a number of tips for great teaching. Let's go over to that sidebar. The world's worst teaching method. What is the absolute worst teaching strategy in the world? Lecture, osmosis, memorization, exams with 100 multiple choice questions, long essay questions, anarchy? The answer is none of the above. The world's worst teaching method is the one you always use, no matter what it is or how well you do it. Ever heard the maxim, familiarity breeds contempt?
Oh, yeah.
That applies to teaching as well. When the same thing happens over and over again, we tend to turn our brains off. For maximum learning, our brains must be fully engaged. If you don't know what your favorite teaching method is, ask your students, they'll know. Then make sure you don't use it for a month, or at least use variations of it.
I like the idea that, he's talking about variety when it comes to teens. Because a lot of times it's a hard task to keep their attention for a long time. It's like, they'll change boyfriends like, adults change their, skivvies. Or they'll like a certain song that they hear on the radio or on the internet or some other way that they get their music. And then that's their favorite song for like 3 weeks. And he gets changed to something else.
Yep.
So in particular for teens, that's a good approach. I think the teens today, this will be a bold statement. I think the teens today need all three worse than any other era in my lifetime.
Need what?
All three learning.
Oh, sure. Well, and those three that we gave an example of are just three of, several that we could
Dozens.
bring out of what we,
Yeah.
because we're kind of tying this into what we talked about last time, different channels of communication. So that was kind of like the different channels. Now we're going to talk about methods within each channel, or methods that combine combination of channels. So we're kind of taking this a step forward from where we were at in the last couple of sections. So he says, what is a teaching method? Anything a teacher uses to accomplish his or her goals with a group of students is a method. Sometimes called strategies, methods are simply the how, as in, how am I going to get the students to learn about God's covenant with Abraham? That grows out of the what, as in, what should the students learn about God's covenant with Abraham? All teachers use methods every time they teach. It is impossible not to use methods. Even those who lecture every minute of the lesson are using a teaching method called lecturing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was when I originally read it earlier, it's cracking up. Funny.
How to choose a good method. There's no perfect teaching strategy for a given situation. One of many good options will do. Of course, several poor options are also available, so how do you know? Here are a few ideas. Know your group. You have to know let's say, people you are teaching very well in order to pick the best methods. Some groups love discussion and others don't. Some groups are very artistic, while others value mental challenges. Know your aims. What you hope students will take away from each aspect of the lesson should also shape your discussion. Cognitive aims are usually not best accomplished through a service project. Personal application requires something other than recitation. Know your setting. The method you choose must fit the room and resources available. Don't decide to use a greased watermelon relay to teach teamwork if your kids will be in good clothes and you'll be meeting in a small room shared by the church treasurer. Don't plan to show a video clip if you are not sure about the availability or quality of a TV and VCR DVD player.
VCR.
Yeah, know yourself. Well, I think it said 2004, but I guess that's still,
There were still a few around.
Yeah.
Good.
know yourself. You also need to have a good handle on who you are and what methods you could lead well. Creating a sculpture of the Last Supper might be a great way to help youth visualize that setting. But unless you or another leader can help the class create a decent sculpture, the method will actually take away from the message.
Mhm.
All right, so any thoughts, any comments on that? So we got basically just thinking about what is a method. So it's kind of went over this a little bit in the preaching section. You know, you have your material and then you have, okay, how am I going to present that, right? This is kind of taking it a step further where we're talking about we're not just assuming that we're lecturing the whole time, which is, you know, essentially what preaching would be. It's by definition proclaiming, so that translates to lecture if we use teaching terminology. But if we're going to break out of, you know, that into other types of methods, we're got our material and then we got the way that we're going to engage that material. So summarizing, he says, know your group, know your aims. So again, like with the preaching class, we said, okay, what is the purpose of this sermon, right? That was a step in the process. So similarly here, what is it that this, you know, this teaching is specifically about? And you could, I don't know if you guys remember the lists of different types of goals, you know, it's kind of like, is it more a goal related to understanding? Is it more a goal related to application? You know, what type of a goal is it? And I think that's kind of what he's saying. Different types of aims or goals might be more conducive to different types of methods. And again, know your setting, know yourself. And even with that being said, know yourself, I think, you know, there's some stretching that we could do, you know, within that. You could say, well, I know myself and this is the only way I like to do it. You know, it's kind of like, I think Andy Stanley kind of spoke to that in the book that we read by him, where he's like, you know, boring is not a style. He kind of challenged people to not just, you know, be stuck in the way they've always done it, but to be willing to get creative and mix it up a little bit. Who wants to go ahead and read the next section? I gotta plug in my computer.
I'll read it. The discussion monster. I have to admit my bias. I love discussion. As a teacher, I use some type of discussion in almost every single session I teach, and I think you should too. Yes, I know the sidebar of the previous page warns against using any method too much, but discussion is more than a method. It is a coin of term, a meta
method, yeah.
or over-teaching category of many related sub-methods. Discussion is so varied as to its uses, aspects, layers, and complexities. It is more than just one method. I would also say that the various arts, student projects, and even special trips and events are also meta methods. Because of my belief in that discussion is so important, I want to take the chance to expand on it at some length, beginning with advantages and disadvantages.
James, you have something to interject?
I was just responding to that line and I thought about the suggestion that we do.
Yep, special trips.
Yeah, the service project.
It's right there.
It's right there, right in front of us.
Confirmation.
Confirmation.
Advantages of discussion. I have some very good reasons why I like to use discussion so much. From what I've learned, here are some key ones, key advantages. Students want to talk. When I started in youth ministry, I was convinced youth came because I was so great and funny and wonderful. How wrong I was. Students come primarily because of each other. They want to talk to each other and they want to hear from each other. Leading a great discussion during a lesson is my way of using their natural tendencies to accomplish my teaching aims.
Oh, man.
Discussion, and I would say that applies to more than just, teenagers.
I agree.
Although some people like to talk more than others, but
Especially
Amen, that's me.
Christian fellowship.
sure. Well, but I think, yeah, I think using fellowship as a method for teaching, right? Fellowship could be a benefit, in and of itself, but discussion engages brain cells. A thoughtful response to a well-formulated question requires the use of gray matter. When a teacher crafts great questions, students are encouraged to use their God-given minds to engage with the subject at hand. It helps make learning active rather than passive. It can enhance communication skills. As teachers, our goal is not just to make sure youth are, quote, getting it as we teach, but to help make them better people all around. Leading a good discussion will aid the development of students' verbal communication skills. By encouraging young people to think about what they want to say and say it clearly, teachers create better communicators. Teachers can assess learning during the discussion. The quality of the responses should help teachers understand how well youth are progressing toward the lesson aim. Discussion gives you a chance to evaluate on the fly and either go back and review more or go in a whole new direction if need be. Discussion invites learning from multiple sources. One of my favorite aspects of a good discussion is that it allows students to learn from everyone else, not just me. If I have a class of 20 students, then there are 20 other sets of experiences, thoughts, and opinions available besides mine. How selfish and arrogant of me to think that my input is the best or most important. Plus, sometimes kids can explain something to each other much better than I ever could. So any thoughts about the advantages mentioned?
I just said it just a few seconds ago, learning from local sources. Sitting in this class,
Right.
4 or 5 people,
Right.
4 or 5 different angles. And of course, we're going to be looking to the instructor, the teacher to show us and keep us from going on to this, but it's invaluable to listen to everybody's perspective in my opinion.
Right.
Fills in the cracks really good. So very often I will sit back and just, oh, good. Oh, that was good.
Yeah.
Those two
Yeah.
together.
And we know that our lead student, even when we had more people in the room. And it got combative. When the lead student knew how to reel that in. Make it real.
Yeah, it was probably hit and miss, but
He had to take the reins back really hard several times. Yeah.
okay, well, that kind of leads us to potential problems with discussion. Discussion does have its drawbacks, though. Some hazards to be aware of include the following. Discussion can take up too much time. Well, we've seen that. Anytime a teacher opens the door for discussion, there's a potential for it to get out of hand. Sometimes it takes longer to wrap up the discussion or to get to the main point than you anticipate. Discussions sometimes ramble off the subject. Both students and teachers are often guilty of this. Teens easily go off on tangents because they tend to think so randomly. A good discussion leader needs to learn how to redirect at such times.
And yet, there has been many, many times that these little rabbit trails will be very profitable.
Sure.
Here's Bible study, well, wait a minute, what do you think about this? Well, then here's an opportunity to correct or bring them back over here.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Those tangents can be profitable. You
Sure.
watch them and not let them get it too far.
I just remember, how we, when it comes to the essential lesson, we had a goal that it would be covered within the first year, within,
Yeah.
and that didn't happen. And with good reason,
Mhm.
it just seemed like there was so much going on in the classroom at the time. That there was, it was hard to keep going and focus on the subject can because of all the rabbit trails and then the combativeness that was going on too. But in the end, when we got to the end of those 8 lessons, I looked back and I said, despite some of the conflict and despite some of the battle and how difficult a certain personality was with you, I would have not had it any other way because I saw our lead student grow in leaps and bounds and how to facilitate. It's based on that one particular challenge.
Well, let's not,
Huge step forward.
let's not forget how that was a lesson, that was a school for us, so that when we run into circumstances like that, how do we handle it?
Yeah, yeah.
No, yeah, I'm not even assuming that
That's not what we're saying.
I was exemplary in that, but yeah, it was,
When you have zero data on how to handle something like that, how you handle it was invaluable.
Yeah.
And we're not.
That was an
gonna
example to all of us.
sure.
We're not gonna suggest that.
It was an example to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can, if you want,
I learned
you can go.
volumes.
Yeah,
By sitting back and watching.
yeah.
Speaking of which, it goes on to say, individuals can dominate discussion.
Sure, I didn't read that.
No matter how hard you try to avoid them, there is at least one discussion hog in every group. Teenagers crave attention and some take advantage of group discussions to make sure everyone knows they are there. And of course, this is not just teenagers, but I just want to point out that sometimes the teacher can be the discussion hog, and so that's kind of where, opening it up for discussion can be a way to lead by example as well. Introverts and other process thinkers may be left out. On the other side of the continuum are the shy students who rarely, if ever, say anything during discussions. That is too bad because they are often the process thinkers who have the most valuable nuggets to contribute.
I'll tell you what, there's a person in this room right now that, there was a time when they came into the classroom, they would barely speak for a couple of days at a time. But once that person got around to really participating and being engaged, people pulling them out and getting rid of the gate. Stillwater Run there's a great
Sure.
thing. When James started speaking out, I was amazed by how deep.
The word I thought of was depth.
Yeah.
How deep the thinking was, and then what he had to say was of such importance and so profitable for all of us. I would lean back and say, did that come out of the mouth of a guy who barely spoke for 2 or 3 days at a time? It's like, wow.
No, they came from.
So you learn by doing,
They
Yeah.
came from a man who listened, people who shut up and listen.
Yeah,
There you go.
we can learn from that.
You're teaching the same, BW, you're teaching, brother.
Amen. Discussion can hide a lack of preparation. That's probably happened in the classroom here before. I mean,
Yeah, a couple times.
because teens enjoy talking, it is easy to open class with a question and let them go with it. For a while. This means the teacher could go in totally unprepared and no one would ever know. A good teacher never uses discussion to mask a lack of preparation.
Have you ever done?
Maybe not on purpose, I don't know. It's probably,
Time that I can recollect, was like, you know, gather, didn't prepare anything. What is your idea of the concept? I don't recall.
Again,
That's probably
I
not-
love it.
But it ended up being pretty good, fruitful discussion.
Sure.
We filled the class time, and then it was just like, we didn't want to end. But it was like.
Thank you for the transparency. I mean, you're human for crying out. You're a dad, you're a pastor.
You know what else does that in this community?
You're a husband.
A whole bunch. So we're in Discipleship Connection Fellowship. Lady was a wonderful job with this. I mean, yes, she'll say it, but what do you have? And she'll just say, I've got this title, what do you think about this? What are the scriptures about it that come to mind? It's like, well, 45 minutes later, we're going, oh, we're taking the Last Supper now? I wish it would go, I wish it would go longer.
Nice.
It's cool to watch.
yeah, I need to make it over there for one of those.
Yeah, it's Saturday only now.
Okay, yeah. Well, he goes on, again, speaking of disadvantages of discussion, it only works well with smaller groups. Discussions need to be deep and intimate to have an impact for most students. That cannot happen in a large group. I know a lot of teenagers who tell me they like going to churches with large youth groups so they can just talk with their friends and not participate in anything deep. That is not a good learning environment.
Well, I'll tell you what, the bigger the numbers. And if you have a structured set amount of time. I can say you've got 30 kids. You've got 2 hours. Guess what? Half of them at least are not even be able to get a word of that. But yeah, I would think smaller groups would be more advantageous. Like the 10, 12. I don't know.
Yeah.
Depends on the kids.
All right, types of questions. For most people, leading a great discussion does not come easily or naturally. It takes work, just like most other aspects of teaching. What your students get out of a discussion has everything to do with the quality of the question you ask. In leading a discussion, it is helpful to know that there are many different types of questions. All right, so I would encourage us to make note of some of this. Closed questions or factual questions. These ask for different answers. They have a limited number of correct responses, usually only one. Yes, no, true, false, and recall questions all fit this category. If you were teaching a lesson about the fall of Adam and Eve, some examples would be, where did Adam and Eve live before the fall? Did they listen to the serpent's temptations? What tree did he convince them to eat from? Okay, so let's call it a closed question or a factual question.
There's definitely one. Yes.
Right. Open questions, in contrast to closed questions, open questions are those that have more than one potential answer. There are many different styles. Open questions can fit into any of the following groups. Interpretive questions. These questions require students to make sense of information. Why would the serpent want to tempt Adam and Eve? What are some reasons God might have prohibited them from eating from that one tree? How likely is it that Adam and Eve thought about the consequences of their action? Thought questions. These require students to think beyond the specific information in the lesson. Since Adam and Eve had it made in the Garden of Eden, why would they think about disobeying God? What other characters in Scripture can you think of who were tempted so directly?
David.
Which of those characters were able to resist temptation? So I'm kind of analyzing these as we go.
Mhm.
Trying to distinguish between those two categories. They both have examples that are fairly speculative.
Mhm. the one that stands up is an interpretive question, why would the serpent want to tempt Adam and Eve? That is a quintessential, speculative question, because there's a number of probably very good answers that would be essentially correct.
Well, and it's kind of. The nature of these questions, there might be, I mean, there still might be one correct answer. It seems like what's different about them in some cases is not that there isn't a correct answer, it's more that it's speculative what that correct answer might be based on the lack of, information in the text. I don't know if some of these questions are good examples. To me, an interpretive question based on what it says is there's some information given that we could base a answer on. So like, why would the serpent want to tempt Adam and Eve? There's not any information in the text that we would draw an inference from. So I don't know if that's an interpretive.
Well, you would have to first read the passage. And then the evidence would be there and.
Within like the passage of Genesis,
Yeah,
or
yeah, you would have to read that, and just for this question alone. The clear first response answer would be, Satan wanted them to doubt God. I mean,
sure, but I guess the way I took that question was, what was his motivation for whether it's doubting God, getting them to doubt God, getting them to disobey? I would kind of lump those together and just point out that it doesn't really say why he wanted to do that, at least not in that passage. So anyways, I'm just analyzing it as we talk about these.
Interpretive, the way it's described, that means the information context. If you ask a question that could be derived in the open end, but it could be derived from
Right.
where
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
what do you think about
Yeah. So this goes beyond the information of the lesson. Well, in any case, getting the concept of the different types of questions is the main point here. But yeah, I just was questioning the examples. Evaluation questions. These push students to figure out why something happened, the result of an action, or how it could have been different. What might have happened if Adam would have resisted Eve after she ate the fruit? Why did some other people in the Bible successfully resist temptation? How did Adam and Eve's choice affect all aspects of creation? So maybe there is supposed to be some overlap between these categories, but still some difference. Application question. These allow students to think about how the subject matter might make a difference to them. So this seems more set apart. How has Adam and Eve's choice affected you? What are some examples of how you were tempted this week? What can you learn from how others resist temptation? That was pretty straightforward.
no,
Any thoughts about those categories? So two bigger categories, closed and open, and then several types of open questions. So which type of question do you think is more productive in a teaching?
the open question. Better approach it aside. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
It promotes speculation, is that what you're saying?
not only speculation, but, not only that, but, you think, well, you want to be speculative when you're handling the word of God, you want to go investigate the passage in question first.
Well, that's kind of my contention is, is it really, how helpful is it to, promote speculation?
Because if you follow speculation in a productive manner, you can have an increase in knowledge and understanding.
Okay,
That would be one of the benefits.
And then you could also see students overall understanding.
Yeah. It's like sometimes. You know what's really funny? You do it's a hideous expression of the devil's advocate a
Mhm.
couple times. We're gonna have to find another way to bring that out.
Right,
But I know that in this classroom, that is a tact that has been used in a really productive manner on many occasions. And for good reason, for that very reason, I believe, is we can actually see where the student's level of understanding is. There was a time when we first, we started the class. You weren't here quite yet. I don't know why I waited this long to tell you, but I was actually afraid of giving incorrect or incomplete answers. Because you were a student in college, and I didn't want to look like I didn't know anything at all. And now, after, trial and error and definitely, if I'm wrong, I don't really care. I really don't care. I
Yes.
realize that that's part of the, process. Learning process. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can be definitely afraid of giving incorrect answers. Especially, and I'll tell on myself, there were a lot of females in the class. And I think, well, like student in front of a girl.
well, I can.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would say, they both can be used productively, and I think they both can be, less productive. So for my 2 cents, I mean, obviously, closed question, if it's really obvious, it might not be as productive, depending on, I guess, this is kind of keeping in mind, you might have younger audiences, but even I would say for adults, if we're kind of at an entry level point, where we're just practicing observing the text, even if the answer is right there, I think that can still be helpful, to get them practicing, not just coming up with their own answers. In fact, now that I'm even saying this, I feel like not necessarily in Telos, but just in all the different, classes that I've done, like the discipleship curriculum, or one-on-ones. I would say more often has it happened that I ask a closed question and I get a speculative answer than the other way around. In other words, it seems like people are, and maybe it's our culture or maybe just coincidence of the people that I've happened to work with, but trend is that we tend to speculate or rely on, past information that was given to us rather than, having a discipline to read a text and say, this is what it says. So I think closed questions actually can be really important for just learning that basic skill of like reading comprehension, or maybe that's because our culture's education is not the greatest these days.
Our public school system is trash, just call it.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so I think closed questions can be important as well.
It's like, a perfect example of it would be these 3 questions you're asking about the example of the Garden of Eden that are right in front of us. If somebody never picked up the Bible, or opened it up and read the text and read the story, the only way that they would respond would be something speculative. Well, why wouldn't?
Yeah.
If they actually read it themselves, they would probably get the correct answer.
On the closed questions, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the specific ones you have right here.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Debbie?
Oh, how often has it been asked what would appear to be a closed question, and you're like, well, that's not exactly the answer I was looking for.
Yeah,
To find out where everybody's heads are at.
sure. Yeah, I mean, an example of that comes up from recently was I was going through, the first lesson talking about First John 3, where it talks about, as we are, when we see him, we will be like him because we will see him as he is. And, that text that we use to kind of unpack the goal of a disciple and the method for the goal. And yeah, there was, when I was first doing that, I had one particular question in mind, or one particular answer, I should say. And then, yeah, different people saw different aspects of the answer, and I was like, oh yeah, actually there is, a few different elements in there that kind of answer that question. So now when I present it to, I say, okay, let's, where do you see the answer to this question? What's the method for becoming like Jesus implied in this passage? And I'll even say, there's probably 2 or 3 and try to get them to find all of them. After the process of people kind of pointing out other ones besides the one I was particularly fishing for.
No, the first one.
Okay. All right,
First one, abiding,
Ron.
one.
Yeah, I mean, so this is looking specifically at First John chapter 3, verses 1 through 2. So it's a closed question based on that particular passage, which doesn't explicitly mention abiding. But if we're talking about just generally, pull from any passage that you want, then sure, abiding would be one of those. But no, I was talking about one of the exercises where we just look at this particular passage, First John
Would you bring up
3,
First
2
John
through
3?
3. Well, I don't have the screen up, so you might have to pull it out on your phone or something to look if you want to look at it, but I can pull it up on
First
mine.
John 3, what?
2 through 3, I think. This is officially a bunny trail, but
See there, but it's profitable.
we'll see.
It can be.
Sometimes we have to get to the end before we know if we should have gone that direction or not.
Yeah.
Depends on how many rabbits we
Oh,
catch.
okay, okay, I get you. All right.
So yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You're good. Part of the benefit of going down the bunny trail is we give you time to jump back in. So we are at the bottom, or I guess no, the middle of page 141.
Perfect.
So we finished the different kinds of questions. So the ones you missed were evaluation questions and application questions. So then we kind of just had some discussion about, what are the benefits of the different kinds. I asked a trick question, which kind is better? And I think the answer is both are important or can be valuable. But yeah, the open questions, I think challenging them to think based on, I guess I would say open questions can invite reasoned responses, but they can also invite, baseless speculation. And so that's kind of where I would say speculation is probably not the most helpful exercise. I mean, if by speculation, we mean we're just making up an answer, without really good reasons for why we're coming up with that answer. We're just throwing stuff out there, that probably it doesn't have a lot of biblical basis or whatever. I mean, not that that's still not profitable at all. You can kind of see that your students are doing that, and then you have some work to do to help them out with that problem. But yeah, I would say questions that have some potential good answers, based on whether it be the text you're studying or other texts that you're going to kind of try to get them to combine and put together, as opposed to, on the farthest end of the spectrum where it's a question that we really may not have any way of knowing, and Or judging that might not be as helpful. But that's just kind of my 2 cents on it. Any other thoughts on that topic?
Well, these evaluation questions, like you said, I think earlier, can help you navigate how the discussion is going. By, these opening questions, evaluation questions especially. You can see how far along you've got with the discussion and how far, how profitable your discussion has been concerning whatever topic you're addressing. It can lead you, by hearing their answers, you can find out, well, you're not quite there yet. We need to open this up a little bit more. These can open up where they are at.
Yeah, and I see one question in this group, and this is just the example. But it says, how did Adam Eve's a choice of it affect all aspects of creation? If somebody comes in that classroom and they've been affected by traditions of men or denominationalism, stuff like that, a good discerning teacher will be able to detect that real quickly. And yeah, those evaluation questions will probably be the ones that probably, I hate to use the phrase, probably uncover the most dirt. Yeah. That are, like, even some of our responses, like somebody who comes out of it, Mormon or Jehovah's Witness environment.
Exactly.
You will.
You'll know
You will
Exactly.
know.
Good example.
Uh-huh.
Yep. By opening these questions, they will tell you